The rain hit the windshield hard, sharp, like it was angry at the city itself. It wasn't a gentle rain. It was the kind that made people rush, hunch their shoulders, and look straight ahead. The kind that washed the streets clean but never touched the hearts of the people walking them. Under the glowing gold lights of a luxury hotel, everything looked polished and expensive. Valets stood straight in pressed uniforms. Glass doors opened and closed smoothly. And just outside the curb, slightly to the side like she didn't belong, sat a worn yellow taxi. Its engine hummed softly, waiting. Inside it, a black woman gripped the steering wheel with steady hands, her face calm, her eyes tired but alert. She had been waiting for a while. Then the doors opened. The wealthy man stepped out like the night belonged to him. Tailored coat, shiny shoes that had never touched real dirt. His phone was pressed to his ear, and he laughed quietly, comfortably, like someone who had never worried about being heard. His laughter carried power, money, control, the kind that made people move out of the way without being asked. He didn't look left, he didn't look right, he didn't look at the taxi at all. The valet rushed forward, smiling too wide, holding an umbrella just right. He gestured toward the waiting cab, trying to be helpful, trying to move the night along. That's when the man finally glanced up. His eyes flicked toward the taxi for half a second, not long enough to see the driver's face, just long enough to decide. His mouth tightened. "No," he said, sharp and final. "I'll wait for something else." The word hung there, heavy. Traffic rushed past, rain splashed against the curb, and for a moment everything felt still, too still. The valet froze, the people nearby slowed their steps, curiosity pulling at them, but no one said anything. No one ever did. Inside the taxi, the driver saw it all through the glass. The look. She knew that look well, the quick scan, the judgment, the silent decision about who was worth time and who was. She had seen it at gas stations, office buildings, school parking lots. She had learned not to flinch, learned to breathe through it, learned that dignity didn't need permission. She rolled the window down slowly. "I can take you anywhere," she said. Her voice was calm, professional, no edge, no pleading. The man barely turned his head. He scoffed. It was a small sound, but it cut deep. The kind of sound that told you exactly where you stood. "I said no," he replied. "I don't have time for this." His phone buzzed again. He waved a hand, already done with her, already erasing her presence. The valet looked away, suddenly very interested in the rain pooling by his shoes. People who had paused now kept walking. Whatever this was, it wasn't their problem. The driver nodded once, even though he wasn't looking. She raised the window back up and faced forward again. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass. A woman who had learned how to wait, how to be unseen without disappearing. Seconds passed. Then the man's phone buzzed again. This time his face changed. The easy smile vanished. His shoulders stiffened. He turned his body slightly away from the valet, lowering his voice. The driver couldn't hear the words, but she could see the tension settle in his jaw. Whatever was on the other end of that call mattered. A meeting. A deadline, a place where power was expected to show up on time. He muttered an address under his breath. He looked around. The rain was heavier now, traffic thicker. Whatever other car he was waiting for wasn't coming fast enough. Against his pride, against his instincts, he turned back toward the taxi. "Fine," he said, irritation leaking through every syllable. "Just drive." The valet snapped back into motion, opening the door quickly, relieved. The man slid into the back seat, bringing the smell of expensive cologne and impatience with him. The door shut with a heavy thud, sealing them together in a small, quiet space. The driver didn't smile, didn't apologize. She simply met his eyes in the rearview mirror for a brief moment, then nodded once. She pulled away from the curb. The city stretched out ahead of them, wet and glowing, streetlights smearing into long reflections across the road. Inside the car, silence settled in thick layers. The man leaned back against the leather seat, already pulling his phone back out, already reclaiming the control he felt he'd lost for a moment. To him, this was just a ride, a delay, a minor inconvenience. To her, it was another night. She drove smoothly, confidently, her hands steady on the wheel. Each turn was familiar, each light timed by memory more than sight. Rain didn't bother her. Traffic didn't bother her. She had driven through worse. The man shifted in his seat, glancing around the cab like he was taking inventory. The worn edges, the faint rattle, the small signs of a life lived on long hours and thin margins. His expression tightened again, but he said nothing. Finally, she spoke. "Destination?" she asked, just one word, but the way she said it made him look up from his phone. There was something in her tone, not challenging, not weak, just steady, grounded, like she wasn't asking for instructions, but confirmation. He gave the address quickly, clipped like it should already be obvious. Like everyone should know where he was headed. She repeated it once, calm, clear, then she drove. As the taxi moved deeper into the city, the noise faded slightly. The rain softened. The man stared out the window, watching buildings slide past, unaware that something had already shifted, that this ride wasn't like the others, that the woman in the front seat wasn't as invisible as he thought. His phone buzzed again. He ignored it this time. The driver's eyes stayed on the road, but her mind was somewhere else, on late nights, on early mornings, on all the times she had been overlooked, talked over, dismissed with a glance, on all the times she had swallowed it and kept going. The man adjusted his coat, uncomfortable for reasons he couldn't name. The silence felt heavier now, different, like the air itself was watching. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, something was waiting, because sometimes the ride you didn't want is the one you need. And sometimes, the road you ignore is already leading you somewhere you can't avoid. The taxi disappeared into the rain, carrying two lives that were about to collide in ways neither of them could see yet. The taxi moved away from the curb like nothing important had just happened. Smooth, quiet, controlled. Rain streaked across the windows, turning the city lights into long, blurry lines that stretched and faded as they passed. Outside, the world rushed forward. Inside the car, time slowed down, thick and heavy, like it was waiting for something to happen. The wealthy man leaned back into the seat, sinking into the leather as if it belonged to him. He pulled out his phone again, thumb scrolling, eyes locked on a screen full of numbers, names, and plans that didn't include the woman driving him. He didn't say thank you, didn't ask her name, didn't even look at her again. In his mind, the moment had passed. She had served her purpose. She was invisible now. That was how the world worked, or at least how it had always worked for him. The driver watched the road. Her posture didn't change. Her face stayed calm. She had learned long ago how to sit with silence. Silence was safer than speaking when people decided who you were before you opened your mouth. Traffic thickened ahead. Red lights stacked on top of each other. The taxi slowed. The man sighed loudly, tapping his phone against his palm like the delay was a personal insult. "You know," he said, not bothering to look up, "there's a faster route." She didn't react right away. She checked her mirrors, watched a bus cut across two lanes, then she answered, "I know." Just two words, simple, steady. Something about her tone made him glance up. No apology, no nervous laugh, no rush to please, just certainty. It bothered him in a way he didn't expect. Seconds passed, then minutes. The silence stretched again, pressing in on him. He wasn't used to silence that didn't bend to him. Usually people filled it, explained themselves, tried to impress, tried to be liked. He cleared his throat. "So," he said, eyes forward now, "how long have you been doing this?" "Driving." "Long enough," she replied, still calm, still even. He smirked, leaning forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. "You don't seem like the type who planned for more." The words landed hard. They weren't loud. They didn't need to be. They carried judgment, assumption, a quiet cruelty wrapped in casual conversation. The driver didn't flinch. She didn't defend herself. She didn't ask what he meant. She kept her eyes on the road, hands steady on the wheel. City lights reflected in her eyes like distant memories, like nights she didn't talk about, like choices that were never as simple as people liked to believe. He waited for a reaction. When none came, he kept going. "People make choices," he said, shrugging. "Some end up in the back seat forever." Her fingers tightened slightly around the steering wheel, not in anger, not in fear, in resolve, the kind that forms quietly deep inside where it can't be shaken by words. "You'd be surprised," she said softly. He chuckled, shaking his head, already dismissing the thought. The taxi rolled on, passing through neighborhoods that changed block by block. Tall glass buildings gave way to older brick ones. Bright signs faded into flickering streetlights. The wealth thinned. The streets narrowed. The man barely noticed. He was back on his phone, responding to messages, checking the time, watching the countdown tick closer to something important. To him, the city was just a backdrop, a place he moved through without touching. But the driver noticed everything. She noticed the corner where the grocery store used to be before it closed. The school with the cracked steps that still filled up every morning. The park where kids played until the lights went out because their parents worked late. Every turn carried a story. Every street held weight. His phone buzzed again, louder this time, more urgent. He frowned, looking out the window now, trying to place where they were. "Are you sure you're going the right way?" he snapped. "Yes," she said. "This is exactly where you need to go." He laughed, short and sharp. "I doubt that." But something in her voice lingered, quiet, grounded, certain in a way that didn't ask for permission. It made his stomach tight. He shifted in his seat, suddenly uncomfortable. He had spent his life controlling rooms, walking into meetings where people waited for him to speak, signing papers that changed other people's lives without ever seeing their faces. He was used to power feeling solid, reliable. But in this small taxi, moving steadily through the rain, something felt different. The road curved, the buildings grew lower, the lights fewer. He put his phone down, watching her now through the space between the seats. He noticed how focused she was, how she didn't rush even when traffic pushed, how she didn't look back for approval. "Where did you say you were taking me again?" he asked. She repeated the destination calmly. He nodded, but doubt crept in anyway. He didn't like not knowing exactly where he was. Not being the one giving directions, not being in control. Outside, the rain slowed to a mist. Inside, the tension thickened. The driver adjusted her mirror slightly. For a brief moment, their eyes met. There was no challenge there, no anger, just awareness, like she saw him clearly without the money, without the power. He looked away first. The taxi continued forward, tires humming against wet pavement, carrying two lives on the same road, headed toward a moment neither of them could turn away from now. And somewhere deep in his chest, beneath the impatience and the pride, a quiet unease began to grow. Because control doesn't always disappear all at once. Sometimes it slips away mile by mile, and he could feel it happening even if he didn't yet understand why. The taxi slowed down, not suddenly, not hard, just enough to pull him out of his thoughts. The wealthy man looked up from his phone, already annoyed, ready to complain about another delay, but the words never came. His eyes moved past the glass, past the rain-speckled window, and his expression changed. Confusion first, then something closer to fear. They weren't downtown anymore. No towers scraping the sky, no bright signs fighting for attention. The street was quiet, clean, calm. A modern building stood ahead, lit softly from below, its lines sharp and intentional. Stone, glass, purpose, and carved into the front a name he knew too well, his breath caught in his throat. "Stop the car," he said, sharp, louder than he meant to. She stopped. The engine hummed. The rain ticked softly against the roof. He stared out the window like he was looking at a ghost. His heart began to pound, fast and uneven. He hadn't been here in years, maybe longer. He told himself it didn't matter. That it was just another building, another project, but his hands were shaking. "Why are we here?" he demanded, turning toward her now. For the first time since he got in the taxi, she turned fully to face him, not through the mirror, not halfway. She turned in her seat and looked directly at him. Her eyes were steady, clear, unafraid. "This," she said, her voice calm but firm, "is your destination." He laughed once, a short, nervous sound that surprised even him. "That's impossible," he said. "Didn't say to come here." "You didn't have to," she replied. He opened his mouth to argue, but she continued before he could cut her off. "You're on the board here," she said. "You funded this place, you just haven't visited in years." The words hit him all at once. Board, funded, years. Memory rushed in like a wave, meetings with polished tables, lawyers explaining benefits, advisors talking about image. A foundation created with a pen stroke and a smile for the cameras, scholarships, opportunity. Hope, all wrapped in good press and clean numbers. He swallowed hard. The building wasn't just familiar, it was his. A scholarship foundation, his name etched into the stone out front. A place meant to change lives, or at least look like it did. He had never walked these halls, never sat with a student, never read a letter that wasn't filtered through assistants and summaries. To him, it had been a line item, a strategy, something done once and forgotten. She reached into the pocket behind the passenger seat and pulled out an envelope. It was worn at the edges, creased like it had been opened and closed too many times. She held it for a moment, then placed it gently on the seat beside him. "My daughter," she said, holding his gaze, "was accepted here." He looked down at the envelope but didn't touch it. "Full ride," she continued. "Top of her class, smart, focused, worked harder than anyone I've ever known." His throat tightened. He felt it. The pressure behind his eyes, the weight in his chest. "She was brilliant," the driver said, her voice steady but softer now. "But last year the funding was quietly cut. No warning, no explanation, just a letter." She nodded toward the envelope. "She got that in the mail." Silence swallowed the car, not the awkward kind, the heavy kind, the kind that presses down and doesn't let you breathe. "She works 2 jobs now," the woman went on. "Early mornings, late nights. I drive nights so she can study during the day." He stared at the envelope like it might burn him if he touched it. He thought of all the documents he had signed without reading, all the meetings he skipped, all the times someone else decided what mattered because he was too busy. He finally looked at her, really looked. Not a driver, not a service worker, a mother. A woman who had carried hope in both hands and watched it slip through her fingers because of a decision made in a room she was never allowed into. The woman he had dismissed at the curb, the life he had overlooked, the consequence of a signature he barely remembered signing. "I didn't know," he whispered. His voice sounded small, stripped of power. She nodded once. "That's the problem." The words weren't angry. They didn't need to be. They were truth, clean and sharp. He felt something shift inside him, something unfamiliar. He had faced lawsuits without flinching. He had stared down rivals and smiled. Lost money and made it back without losing sleep. But this was different. This wasn't about numbers or reputation or control. This was about impact. He picked up the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a letter, formal, polite, cold, a notice explaining that due to restructuring, funding had been discontinued. No apology, no explanation, just an ending. He saw it now, the distance, the cruelty of systems designed without faces in mind. "I thought," he started, then stopped. There was nothing he could say that didn't sound empty. She watched him quietly, letting him sit with it, letting the truth do its work. "I never meant," he tried again. She raised a hand gently, not to silence him, to slow him down. "I know," she said. "Most people don't." Outside, the building stood still, solid, unmoved. Inside the taxi, everything had changed. For the first time, he understood what it meant to be unseen, to have your future decided by someone who would never know your name. The power in the car shifted, not with shouting, not with blame, but with truth. He leaned back in the seat staring at the building again. His name on the stone felt heavier now, less like pride, more like responsibility. The rain stopped. The quiet stretched on, and as the taxi idled there, the wealthy man realized something that chilled him more than the night air ever could. This ride wasn't over, it was just beginning. Because once you see the cost of your silence, you can never unsee it. The wealthy man sat frozen in the back seat, the envelope resting in his hands like it weighed more than it should. His fingers trembled, not from the cold, but from something deeper. For the first time in years, his money couldn't speak for him. No smooth deal, no quick signature, no assistant to clean it up before it touched him, just paper, ink, and consequences. "I can fix this," he said quickly, the words rushing out like he was afraid silence might swallow him whole. "I'll make a call. I'll have it reversed by morning." The taxi stayed still. The engine hummed softly like it was holding its breath. She didn't answer right away. She watched him, not with anger, not with hope, with patience, like someone who had learned the difference between regret and change. She studied his face, the tight jaw, the restless eyes, the way he leaned forward as if speed alone could undo years of distance. "Fixing it isn't enough," she said finally. Her voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. "You built something meant to change lives," she continued. "Then you walked away." The words landed clean and sharp. They cut deeper than shouting ever could. They named the truth without decoration, and there was nowhere for him to hide from it. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked down at the envelope once more, then slowly reached for the door handle. When he stepped out of the taxi, the night air hit him hard. The building stood tall in front of him, quiet and solid. His name carved into stone near the entrance caught the light. For years, that name had felt like pride. Tonight, it felt like weight. He stood there longer than he meant to. Inside, the world he had ignored waited. Meetings were delayed that day. Calls went unanswered. Schedules were pushed aside. For the first time in a long time, nothing else mattered enough to pull him away. He walked through the doors. The halls were brighter than he expected. Not flashy, just clean, purposeful. He passed bulletin boards covered with handwritten notes. Thank you cards. Photos of students smiling wide, holding books, holding dreams. He stopped and read them. Really read them, not summaries, not reports. Words written by people who believed in what this place promised. He asked to see files, not the polished ones, the real ones. He sat at a long table and opened folders one by one. Names, stories, backgrounds, struggles, victories. Each file carried a life he had never taken time to know. Students passed by, some curious, some nervous. A few recognized him from photos. He could feel their eyes on him. The power he once carried into rooms felt different now. Smaller, more fragile. He asked questions, listened to answers, heard about programs cut quietly, about opportunities lost without explanation, about dreams paused not because of failure but because someone far away decided they weren't worth the cost. By the time evening came, his chest ached. Weeks passed. This time change followed. Funding was restored, then expanded, not quietly, openly, with oversight, with systems built to protect the people who depended on it. Accountability wasn't passed off to others. It started with him. Regular visits, open meetings, faces replacing numbers, names replacing lines on a spreadsheet. And the taxi driver, he asked for her name, not because he needed it for a form, because he wanted to know it. When he apologized, it wasn't rushed. It wasn't wrapped in money or promises. He didn't try to explain himself away. He simply said he was sorry, and he meant it. She listened. She nodded. She accepted the apology the same way she had carried the truth, with dignity. Months later, the rain was gone. Spring light filled a large hall where rows of chairs stretched toward a stage. Families whispered. Cameras flashed. Nervous laughter floated in the air. The wealthy man sat quietly in the back row. No special seat. No spotlight. Just another face in the crowd. Then her daughter walked across the stage. Confident, radiant, earned. Her smile wasn't borrowed. It was built. Every step carried nights of studying, early mornings, sacrifices made by more than one person. When she took her diploma, the applause was loud, but the moment felt personal. The man felt his throat tighten again. Their eyes met across the room. The taxi driver and the man who once ignored her. No words were exchanged. None were needed. Everything that mattered had already been said. As the ceremony ended and people stood to cheer, the man stayed seated for a moment longer. He let it settle. The truth of what that ride had cost, and what it had given back. Some debts can't be paid in cash, only in character. That night, as the city lights came on one by one, the lesson echoed far beyond a single taxi ride. Never confuse silence with insignificance. Never mistake power for worth. And never ignore the people who carry the world forward. Because one day, without warning, they may be the ones driving your destiny.